You are listening to Human Capital Watch from the Conference Board.
Hi, everyone, and welcome for joining us for today's Human Capital Watch podcast series. We are looking at how organizations can build highly engaged teams. My name is Robin Erickson, and I'm a principal researcher here at the Conference Board. And I'm very excited to introduce KimArie Yowell, the VP of Talent Development at Quicken Loans. KimArie, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Robin.
Well, I'm looking forward to picking your brain on how Quicken Loans exhibits and builds the most effective teams. So, first of all, I understand that Quicken Loans calls all of its employees, from new hires to CEO, team members. And I find that that's really interesting. Do you know where that came from?
Honestly, Robin, I cannot tell you where it originated from. And it's never been a question that I've thought about. However, the next time I run into our chairman or CEO or vice chair, I'm going to ask that question. But what I can tell you is we believe at Quicken Loans that words matter. And for my very first day of attending Jumpstart, which is what every new team member goes through on their first day, it's a day-long orientation of sorts. We are called team members. I was greeted by a team member saying, "Welcome to the team." And I think that's important when we talk about developing highly engaged teams and highly engaged organizations, because the philosophy around it is that you're not in this alone. We're in this together. I remember about a year or so ago, our CEO, Jay Farner, quoted Helen Keller, and he said, "Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." And I think that is the epitome of what we strive to do in our organization, that we are so much greater when we work together, when we collaborate, when we connect, when we build. That's how innovation happens.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I hope you will come back to me and let me know after you talk to your CEO or chairman about where that came from. But clearly that philosophy is working for you all at Quicken Loans, simply because Quicken Loans has been ranked the highest in the country for customer satisfaction. But more important, from the employee perspective, you've been named to Fortune Magazine's 100 Best Companies to Work For. And
16 years in a row.
16 years in a row, which is very impressive. And so clearly this philosophy is working and is setting the Quicken Loans culture apart from others. So thank you for sharing that with us. My next question is around, what are some of the different types of teams at Quicken Loans?
So within Quicken Loans, we're a flat organization. And I'll tell you, Robin, I had heard that at other companies that I've worked at in the past, and, that seems to be laden with bureaucracy. And when I came to Quicken, I had heard that being said here. And honestly, at first, I didn't believe it. I remember when Bill Emerson, who was our CEO at the time, during ISMS Day, shared with us that if you have a question or if you want to sit down and talk, here's my cell phone number, give me a call. And I didn't take him seriously until I needed to actually reach out to him. And he immediately responded when I left him that voicemail and said, "Hey, let's get some time on the calendar and let's sit down and talk." And that has been my experience for the last 6 years within this organization, is that when we look at the way that our teams are structured, yes, it's hierarchical. We do have a CEO and there is a head of every business area. But when it comes to getting the work done, we focus on the work. So you could be on a virtual team working on a different project where you may be the leader of your division, but now you're working on a virtual team where a team member is leading up that project. And we don't get into status battles, right? It's about how are we getting the work done. We're spread across the United States. We have remote team members. We have team members at different sites. And at the end of the day, we all understand that we have a common goal. And so we're made up of virtual teams, project teams, focus teams. It's a very interesting dynamic, but it works for us.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting to hear that you have many different types of teams. But at the very beginning of your answer, you mentioned an isms day. I'm not sure that our audience will know what that is, and I'm actually very intrigued by the concept. So if you wouldn't mind explaining that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So isms day is centered around our guiding principles within the organization. And so for us, we have 19 of those principles. And so every team member, usually within their first 4 to 6 months, is cordially required to attend a day with our CEO, our vice chairman, and our founder of the organization, and hear directly from them of what the isms mean to them and why they were created. What I think is really cool with this, Robin, is that these weren't values that, a marketing firm or a consulting firm came in and said, hey, here are, we did an assessment and here are your core values. These were principles that were developed over time based upon what we were experiencing and what Dan Gilbert, which is our founder, was seeing in the business. And so, each one of those isms has a background story, a definition to it. And I think that's why it's easy for us to live them, not just say them. At any given time, you will hear team members, sharing an ism. And one of the things that we call it here is when we're making business decisions, are we looking through the isms prism? Are we making those decisions based upon our foundational principles as an organization and as team members within this company, which I think is huge. The other thing I want to add to that, Robin, is that these aren't top-down principles. These are principles where everyone in this organization, including Dan Gilbert himself, there's an expectation that we're living those. And so I can have a conversation that's rooted in the isms with any one of my senior leaders. And if it's about what we're focused on and what we're trying to do, that's going to trump all of it. And it doesn't matter who's, which is actually one of our isms. It's not about who's right. It's about what's right. It doesn't matter who's saying it. It doesn't matter if you're a team member that just started today, or you've been with this organization for 33 years.
That's really impressive. Thank you so much for sharing that concept with us. And it actually leads very nicely into my next question. You were talking about how it's not who says it, it's what's right or something like that in terms of the ism. But and you had talked about being a flat organization. But tell us how your organizational structure at Quicken Loans helps to foster teamwork, collaboration, and engagement.
So I think, going back to the isms that I just shared about, it's not about who's right, it's about what's right. I think that structure and those guiding principles that we have lends itself to teamwork and collaboration and high engagement, because people are encouraged to be their authentic selves, and also to think about this organization and our commitment to the community and the societies that we live in. And so when you have a purpose that you all can rally around, it becomes very easy for people to get on board and work together to get it done. And so, like I said before, we have your standard structure on paper, but once you pull the layers back and you look at the real humans that are here, we are all coming to work every day with the same mission and the same vision, with the desire to make a huge impact. And we understand that we can't do it by ourselves. And so one of the things that Dan Gilbert often says is he doesn't want to be the smartest person in the room. And so that starts to cascade down to our leaders and our team members. Doesn't say that you shouldn't be smart and you shouldn't have intelligence. But what it says is, are you listening more than you're speaking? Are you gathering the different ideas in the room? And so when we think about those who are in our senior leader positions, when they come into a room, they're coming into that room with this desire to learn from the people in the room, and not just with this idea that I have made it because I'm in this position.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I love Dan's quote around doesn't want to be the smartest person in the room, but he's smart enough to know that he needs people around him who can all share. Yeah. So what are some of the different team building and learning events at Quicken Loans?
Oh my gosh, we have many of them. So many of them. We have a team that is specifically focused on team building, which I think is unique, because any team can reach out to us and we can host those. But we also have something that's also cool. It's a program that we have where we teach leaders and team members who are interested how to effectively facilitate team building exercises. And so we give them a kit. We teach them the framework. We teach them how to debrief, how to dig deep, how to ask questions and pull out the richness of learning that happens through a team building. The reason why I point that out is because those are transferable skills that leader or team member can take back into their team, or whether it's a project team or a virtual team or a meeting, and they can use those same skills of asking powerful questions, digging deep, thinking strategically to open up the possibilities of innovation in real time. So it's extremely transferable. So that's one. Another one that we do that I think is really cool is for our senior leaders in the organization, where we get them out of their shells and outside of their comfort zones. And we do an amazing race of sorts. It's a full day. It's from sun up to sundown. They are paired in group. They are not paired. They're grouped in about groups of 7 to 9, and they are stretched beyond stretched. And we open them up to new experiences. We get them to be vulnerable really quickly, because we know that's where the good stuff is. Right. And then they go into this 1 year long journey with each other. And it's usually about 50 folks total that go through this experience. And what we've heard so far, we've been running this program for about 2 years now, is that for many of those leaders, it has been by far the most impactful and eye-opening development program they've ever gone through. And part of that is because we're very intentional about how we make the groups, the 360s that we involve them in, and that day of building a team very quickly. So with that process, we go through the stages of team development very intentionally, and we do it in one day. And so we debrief along the way, and they learn. And again, this is all about how are you also able to apply this back in your business. And then,
KimArie, sorry, but before you go to number 3, do you mind just telling me, how do you choose who will participate? Because that sounds like an amazing program.
So part of it, this, and I've shared this, I think we were talking about this earlier in a different conversation, but we have an idea here about development for all. And so part of this stems out of our desire to want to create a common language and common experience amongst a group of leaders in the organization, but also a common language throughout the organization. And so for this program, it is open up to all leaders in the organization who are responsible for leading other leaders or business function. So our intention is that that entire population at some point will go through the program. So that makes it easier.
No, and I love the idea of it. So thank you for sharing that. It's super.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that not everything should be highly selective or exclusive, because if you're trying to impact an organization and you only, highlight the top 10%, especially for something like this where we were trying to push information out across the organization, if we had limited to 10% of this population, it would not have taken legs. And so for this one, we were just trying to be much more intentional and broad of who the audience was.
Thank you for sharing those. And I actually really liked the idea that you gave before, providing kits for leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Because not, as we all know, sometimes leaders are not the most creative. They're not the most touchy-feely people, some of them. But having a kit that will, help them figure out how to build engagement among their teams, I really love that idea.
And here's the cool thing about that. They get certified, so they go through 8 hours of training for this. But then they become ambassadors, and they're able to not just only facilitate it for their immediate team, they are also taught how to do this for larger audiences. So if they want to go back into their business, and our regions sometimes are about 100, 150, they can actually impact more people than we ever could as a development team. And they've been given the skills and the tools to do so. And so, and that was really born of, one of my directors says it all the time. He says, how do I work myself out of a job? Right. And so for us, we try not to be a prohibitor, but an enabler of the learning and giving them the tools where they can just go and do it themselves.
Well, an important piece of that is around peer coaching and mentoring. And many organizations are using that to help the employees on teams improve their performance and keep them engaged. Are you using peer coaching and or mentoring at Quicken Loans?
Yes, we do. I think we are doing it a lot more than we have. I mean, we follow this 70-20-10 model, right? And so for us, coaching and mentoring being 20% of that model, it's important that we baked it in. And so programmatically, we have set it up with programs such as the Red Door Project, Aspiring Leaders, where we call them growth partnerships. And it's really set up so that both people are taking something away from the relationship, and they're both giving something to the relationship. And that has been really cool, because when we first started into the mentorship realm, we set it up where leaders would be mentored by more senior leaders in the company. And time again, the feedback that we were getting from the senior leaders was that, while I am in the system their mentor, I gained so much from working with that leader, right? And so we set it up that way because we want people to know you can learn from anyone. But we do have structured mentoring programs. When it comes to peer coaching, we have programs like the one that I shared with you earlier, our Leader to Leader program, where they are trained over time on how to coach each other. And again, what that does is when those leaders go back into their business, they're better coaches. They're better coaching managers, right? And so the peer coaching and mentoring is huge. And I think it's been something that, I don't want to say it's been overlooked, but for a long time has been minimized in our world, because we haven't quite figured out how to do it most effectively. And so for our team, we've been really digging into, how do we know that it's working, and how do we know that it's making a difference? And so we do we do have some measurements in place to see the value for the folks who are going through the programming.
That's really terrific, and I love the title "Growth Partnership." That's a great program name. It actually sounds better than mentoring, but I love the fact that's your program name. So we could keep talking about this topic, I think, all day. I love hearing the stories about what you've been doing at Quicken Loans, and I'm fascinated by just how important employee engagement is to the culture there. Thank you again for joining us. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please do subscribe to the podcast series. Look forward to talking to you all again.
This has been Human Capital Watch from the Conference Board.